Welcome back, my friends. Today, we step into the quiet streets of Lagos, where the hum of generators and the smell of evening suya tell 1,000 stories. But the one I bring you now is not whispered in daylight, it moves like a shadow in a room with closed curtains. Michael, 30 years old, sharp in his shirts, neat in his walk, lived in a modest 2-bedroom flat with Ada, his wife of 3 years. Ada was 27. The type of woman whose presence filled a room without her saying a word. She had a laugh that warmed you and eyes that searched deeper than most dared to look. Life had been steady for them. Bills paid, rent settled, small arguments about salt in the soup, nothing that could break the frame of their quiet happiness. But then, the door opened to someone new. Her name was Chioma. 20 years old. Ada's younger sister. She came to stay for a while after her school had gone on strike. She stepped into the house with a small suitcase, a shy smile, and the kind of beauty that made strangers glance twice before looking away. From the start, Chioma's presence shifted the air. Michael noticed her laughter, lighter than Ada's, like the jingle of a bell. He noticed the way she moved around the house, humming songs he didn't know, her anklets softly clinking on the tiled floor. Ada, proud to have her sister close, didn't see anything unusual. She thought it was good for the house to feel lively, to have someone young around. But sometimes, when she walked into the sitting room, she found Michael and Chioma in easy conversation, voices dropping to silence as she entered. It was nothing, or so she told herself. After all, family is family. But in Lagos, my friends, even the most solid walls have cracks, and through those cracks, secrets begin to slip. My friends, the thing about secrets is that they do not arrive with a bang. They tiptoe. They slide in through open windows, hide between folded laundry, and wait. Days turned into weeks in Michael's home. Chioma's suitcase remained by the wall of the small guest room, but her presence filled more than that space. She had a habit of sitting on the edge of the sofa when Michael was watching TV, leaning forward just enough for her laughter to float into his ears. Ada didn't notice at first. She was busy, running her small shop, balancing the books, checking on her mother back in the village. Chioma offered to help at home, cooking sometimes, clearing the table, sweeping the balcony while humming softly. But the walls were listening. One evening, the power went out, as it often did, and the three of them sat in the dim orange glow of a rechargeable lamp. The sound of distant rain tapping on the corrugated roof made the house feel smaller. Michael told a funny story from his office, and Chioma laughed, that kind of laugh that lingers a heartbeat too long. Ada smiled, not thinking much of it, but when she stepped into the kitchen to get them more groundnuts, she heard it. A soft whisper. She couldn't make out the words, just the tone. And when she returned, both Michael and Chioma were silent, their eyes briefly meeting before turning away. That night, Ada lay awake beside her husband, staring at the ceiling fan. She told herself she was imagining things. That her mind was playing tricks on her. But the thing about Lagos nights is, they have a way of feeding your thoughts until they grow teeth. The nights in Lagos have a rhythm of their own, generators humming in the distance, car horns fading into the dark, and somewhere far away, a baby crying. But inside Michael's home, the rhythm was shifting into something Ada could not name. Michael had begun coming home later. At first, he blamed traffic. Then, deadlines at work. But Ada noticed, the way his shirt sometimes smelled faintly of a perfume she didn't own, the way his eyes seemed to avoid hers when she asked too many questions. Chioma, on the other hand, seemed to bloom. Her hair was always neatly braided now, her clothes a little more stylish than when she arrived. She was quicker with her laughter, slower with her steps, and more comfortable in Michael's presence. One evening, Ada sat alone in the sitting room, scrolling through her phone. It was almost 10 p.m., and Michael wasn't home yet. Chioma came in from the balcony, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice low. She ended the call quickly when she saw Ada and mumbled something about a school friend. Ada wanted to believe her. But something in her chest, small but sharp, told her to pay attention. When Michael finally walked in, Chioma was already in the kitchen. He greeted Ada with a brief peck, then disappeared toward the sound of clinking plates. Ada stayed seated, staring at the blue glow of the TV, her mind racing. She heard laughter from the kitchen, hushed, quick, like two people sharing a secret. Then, silence. That night, Ada dreamed of shadows. They moved like smoke through her house, curling around the corners, slipping under doors. And no matter how much she tried to catch them, they always vanished when she turned. Lagos nights have a way of stirring trouble when the world is quiet. That was the night Ada first heard the phone ring twice. It was past midnight. The rain had just stopped, leaving the street outside wet and shiny under the faint glow of the street lamp. Michael was asleep beside her, his breathing steady. Ada was half awake, thinking about her shop sales the next day, when she heard it, a faint vibration from somewhere in the room. Not her phone. She turned her head slowly and saw Michael's phone glowing on the bedside table. The name flashing on the screen wasn't saved, just a number. It rang twice, then stopped. She lay back down, but the air felt heavy. Minutes later, the phone lit up again, this time with a message. Michael didn't move. Ada reached out, almost touching it, but her hand froze. Instead, she closed her eyes, pretending to sleep. In the morning, Michael woke earlier than usual. He dressed quickly, avoiding her gaze, and left without breakfast. When Ada went to the kitchen, Chioma was already there, stirring tea. She looked up, smiled faintly, and asked if Ada had slept well. There was something in her tone, casual, yet almost testing. Later that afternoon, Ada returned home early. As she unlocked the door, she heard a faint laugh from inside. It was Michael's voice, and Chioma's. By the time she entered, the house was quiet, both of them in different rooms as if nothing had happened. The phone that rang twice kept echoing in Ada's mind, and with it, a thought she didn't want to face. Saturday morning in Lagos, the day the streets come alive with traders calling out prices, the smell of roasted corn and fresh pepper mixing in the air. Ada decided to visit the market early, her list in hand, mind still swirling with unanswered questions. She moved through the crowd, bargaining for tomatoes, checking yams for softness, buying fish wrapped neatly in old newspapers. It was almost comforting, until she saw them. Michael and Chioma. They were at a fruit stall across the street, their heads bent close, their laughter carried by the morning breeze. Michael picked up a bunch of ripe bananas, holding them out toward her as Chioma shook her head playfully. Ada froze, her basket heavy in her hands. She wasn't supposed to be there. She had told Michael she'd be going later in the afternoon. For a moment, she thought about walking over, but something stopped her. She stood behind a pile of plantains, hidden, watching as they moved from one stall to another like an ordinary couple. Chioma's hand brushed Michael's arm once, lightly, but it felt like a scream to Ada's eyes. By the time she gathered herself and stepped out, they were gone. The market noise returned, but Ada's heart was louder. When she returned home hours later, both Michael and Chioma were there, Michael fixing something on his laptop, Chioma in the kitchen peeling oranges. Neither mentioned the market. And Ada, she said nothing. But the market had given her more than groceries that day, it had given her another piece of the puzzle. The rain came without warning that evening, a heavy Lagos downpour that turned the streets into small rivers and filled the air with the scent of wet dust. Michael was home early for once. Chioma, too, was inside, sitting on the balcony with a cup of tea, watching the rain splash against the railings. Ada was in the kitchen, cooking vegetable soup, when she heard their voices. Soft. Close. She wiped her hands on a towel and walked toward the balcony. Through the thin curtain, she saw them. Michael was standing beside Chioma, leaning against the rail. She said something, and he laughed quietly, shaking his head. The sound was warm, too warm. Then, he reached out. It was small, just his hand brushing a drop of rain from her cheek, but it felt like lightning to Ada's eyes. Chioma didn't move away. Instead, She looked at him for a moment longer than she should have. Ada stepped back before they saw her. Her chest felt tight, but her hand stayed steady as she stirred the soup. Later that night, after Chioma had gone to her room, Michael came into the kitchen to get water. Ada didn't look at him. He asked how her day was. She said fine without turning around. But in her mind, the image of the balcony, the rain, the touch, the look, played again and again, louder than the storm outside. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind where Lagos feels slower, quieter. The streets outside were calm, the neighbors' children playing softly in the compound. Ada was folding laundry when she realized she hadn't seen Michael or Chioma in a while. She moved down the short hallway toward the guest room. The door, Chioma's door, was shut. Not unusual. But this time, it was locked. Ada stopped. She knocked lightly. Silence. She knocked again, louder. A faint sound came from inside, like hurried movement, fabric brushing against fabric. Then Michael's voice, low, almost startled. Just a minute. Ada froze. Her husband was in Chioma's room. The lock clicked, and the door opened just enough for Michael to step out, his shirt slightly rumpled. Chioma sat on the edge of her bed, looking down at her phone, avoiding Ada's eyes. Michael smiled too quickly. She was just showing me something, he said, brushing past her. Ada stood there for a moment, the clean clothes still in her hands, the smell of freshly washed fabric mixing with the sudden heat in her chest. The rest of the day passed with fake normalcy, lunch on the table, TV in the background, the three of them talking about nothing. But the locked door had unlocked something else in Ada, a certainty that the shadows in her home were no longer just shadows. In Lagos, walls are never just walls. They carry voices. They pass stories from one room to another, from one compound to the next. That's how neighbors know things you never told them. It was a warm evening when Ada met Mama Beezy outside by the clothesline. The older woman was hanging her bright wrappers, her eyes quick and curious as always. "You day try Mama Beezy said with a small smile. "Two young women in your house, no easy for a man." Ada frowned. "Two young women?" she asked slowly. Mama Beezy chuckled, shaking her head. "Ah, no vex. I just day talk say your sister fine well. Every time I see him with Oga, dem day just like say na old friends. Sweet me to see love for house." The pegs in Ada's hand felt suddenly heavy. She forced a small laugh, saying nothing more. But the words sank deep. Later that night, she sat on the balcony alone, watching the streetlights blink. From inside, she could hear Michael and Chioma talking softly. She couldn't catch the words, only the easy rhythm of their voices, the kind that comes from comfort, or something more. The neighbor knew. And if the neighbor knew, Ada thought, maybe she was the last one to admit it to herself. Some truths do not knock. They burst in, uninvited, and rearrange the air in the room. It was a humid night. The smell of fried plantain still lingered from dinner. Ada had gone to the bedroom to fold clothes, but she realized she'd left her phone charger in the sitting room. She walked quietly down the hallway, her footsteps soft on the tiled floor. As she reached the sitting room doorway, she stopped. Michael and Chioma were standing close, too close. Chioma's head was slightly tilted, her eyes locked on his. Michael's hand rested lightly on her arm. "I can't keep doing this," Chioma's voice trembled. "She's your wife." Michael's reply came low, almost a whisper. "I know, but I can't stop." Ada's breath caught in her chest. For a moment, the world around her went silent. The ticking clock. The hum of the fridge. Even her own heartbeat seemed to pause. She stepped into the room. The look on their faces told her they hadn't heard her coming. Chioma's eyes widened. Michael's mouth opened, but no words came out. No one spoke for what felt like a lifetime. The only sound was the faint, distant rumble of a passing Okada. That night, Ada didn't sleep. The confession in the doorway had torn something inside her, leaving the pieces scattered where words could no longer reach. The night felt heavier than usual, as if the city itself knew something was about to break. Outside, the street was quiet, no generators humming, no late-night chatter from neighbors. Inside, the house was a storm waiting to happen. Ada sat in the sitting room, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Michael paced the floor, glancing at her but never holding her gaze. Chioma stood by the wall, her arms folded, eyes fixed on the floor. "Say it," Ada's voice was calm, but it cut through the room like glass. Michael stopped pacing. He opened his mouth, but Chioma spoke first. "It wasn't supposed to happen." Ada's face didn't move. But it did. Silence. The kind that drags every second like an hour. Michael took a deep breath. "I made a mistake," he said. His voice was low, almost breaking. "I didn't plan it. I don't even know how." Ada rose to her feet. "You know exactly how," she said, her eyes burning into his. Then she turned to Chioma. "And you, my own sister. Under my roof." Chioma's lips trembled, but no words came. The argument that followed was not loud. It was worse, a quiet, sharp exchange that left no space for forgiveness. By the end of it, Chioma had packed her small suitcase. Michael sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. Ada stood by the balcony, looking out into the dark city. Somewhere far away, she heard the call of a night hawk. In that moment, she knew the house would never feel the same again. And just like that, the night everything fell apart became the night Ada began building walls no one could ever climb.